I'd like to open the meeting for the Public Works and Protection, Thursday, November 5th, 2020. Roll call, please.
Gary Paul.
Here.
Allison Williams. Here. Jay Krieger.
Here.
Joanne Euclid. Here. And Donovan Miller.
Here.
Got it. Stand for the pledge.
United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Action on the agenda.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. Action from the minutes of, what do we got here?
October 6th.
October 6th, there we go. 2020.
Move to
All in
approve.
favor?
Aye.
Move to approve.
Aye.
Yeah, aye.
Oh, you can't approve.
You weren't
Did
here.
you approve?
Mhm.
You can't because you weren't
can't.
here.
You
for
weren't
that
here.
minute.
Well, I wasn't here for
Yeah,
that one.
but-
Sorry,
So I'll move to.
I read them.
Okay.
We got a first?
Yeah, me.
All right, we got a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Motion passed. Comments from the public, must limit the items not on the agenda, must state name and address, limit to 5 minutes. The board's rule will listen and not discuss them. Personal issues cannot be discussed of individual names. Board is not able to take action at this meeting. Do we have anybody would like to speak on our public? Again, anybody?
Not on the agenda.
Okay. All right, move on then to action items. Item A, action to appeal a denial operations for Sarah Dale.
Good morning.
Mr. Monan.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Before you is a communication from Sarah J. Dahl, who is appealing her denied operator's license application. Ms. Dahl is in the audience if you have any questions for her, and also to speak on her own behalf. Also, along with her is a supervisor if you want to suspend the rules for interested parties to speak. But I turn it over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Can we talk to the chief?
I was going to say, Chief, can we have your comments first on this?
You sure can. So before me was the application and the reason for denial based on the guidelines that I go by and we'll talk about later, but it's an automatic denial for all felony convictions for the last 10 years, especially those that are related to alcohol and drug convictions. I can't necessarily talk about everything that's in her criminal record. However, I will say that there were several drug charges, and she was convicted of possession of methamphetamines, and that was in 2016. She was charged again in 2017, I believe. I'll go down and look at this, and she can talk about that a little bit too. So this was recently that this had occurred. She was also charged with party to a crime, or party to possession of meth. And so there were several other charges that were there that some of them got pled down or some of them got read in. So the premise for my denial is basically based on those guidelines and those convictions, drug-related convictions.
Okay. Would you like to speak on your behalf, Sarah? All right, would you come up to the microphone, state your name and address, speak into the microphone so we can understand and hear you?
Okay. Hello, my name's Sarah Dahl. My address is 1538 Avondale Drive, Ashwaubenon. And I have been convicted of the possession in the past, but They have been, well, the second one has been dismissed because I completed my obligations that the court had, and that was 4 months ago that I did complete them. So I'm a changed person, and I really like this job that I got now, and I'd really like to keep this job and further my employment with them. And the only way I can do that really is to get the bartender's license to continue working for them so I can actually be their second shift worker and work by myself. So I guess that's it.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
I'd like to ask the chief, was the last conviction in 17?
Yes.
Because it's kind of,
Yeah, I believe the last conviction was 17. There were also let me go back and look through her history here. She was convicted in 18 as well, but those were dismissed and read in, and then she had court orders to complete probation and things of that nature. So she did have a charge and issuance in 2018 as well.
thank you.
Chief, in that, I know we're going to be discussing this later in the meeting. Those charges stay with them for how many years?
Well, the
Well, what-
charges stay with them. It's always going to be on her criminal record, if
Always
that's what you're
will be.
asking. Yeah.
Okay. Now, there was a 5-year period and a 10-year period that you were bringing up at our last meeting.
Yeah, those depended on what type of charge that was. So if I look at the 5-year period, those were any drug conviction, whether or not it was a felony or misdemeanor. What I'm referring to now is strictly based on all felony convictions, and those that are also drug convictions are automatic disqualifiers.
Okay. Okay. You have anything that you'd like to say?
I got one thing, because I was told with that last one, that as long as I completed my stuff, that it was supposed to be like wiped off my record. So I'm still kind of confused on why that's even showing on there, because I did complete it all.
Well, I don't know what was said or what was done or what was arranged. I can still tell you that it's on your criminal record, at least the ones that we can find, maybe not the public.
Okay. You know that.
Okay. Anything else? Somebody like to make a motion?
I think she got someone that wants
If
to.
you could suspend the rules for interested parties to speak?
Somebody open the floor to hear what this lady has to say. Please step up here, give us your name and address, please.
I'll make a motion to open the floor.
Second,
Second.
I am Mary T. Willems. My address is 880 Nathan Drive in De Pere. I am Sarah's supervisor at work. Sarah has been with us for a couple months in training. She has showed just very good responsibility. She's great with the customers. Her money handling has been on. I never have to look for suspicion on that part. She's never been late for work. I feel our family is a family of trying to give people a second chance, and I would hate to see this hold her back. I think she's, changed her life, and I think she should have a chance.
How long has she worked for you?
How long? Just after September 1st.
Okay.
Did you know her before that?
No, I did not know her before.
Any
So-
other questions?
I don't,
Okay.
I do want to say also, I have been managing the gas station for 15 years. And, you come along somebody once in a great while that has some good potential, and I feel Sarah does.
thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Move to,
I'll make a motion to go back to regular order of business.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Okay, we need a motion.
Well, I'm going to move that we uphold the denial of the license because the last conviction was within a couple of years.
I'll second it.
Okay, I got a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Sorry.
This still would go to village board later in the month.
Okay, all right, very good. So you can't come back on, what do we got for the 24th
24th.
of November, the village board meeting? It will come up at that, on that agenda also. So that will be the final ruling then. So thank you for coming.
Yes,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Okay, item B, Class A action on beer, Class A action on liquor for Ashwaubenon, Inc., doing business as Clarion Point in Green Bay.
Committee members, before you is a request from Kodiarma Inc., who right now they're operating the O'Connell Lodge at 2815 Ramada Way. However, as your green sheet reflects, they plan on changing their affiliation in the very near future to Clarion Point. As such, it's my understanding Clarion properties are required to possess the ability to offer beer and wine to their customers. They would like to, as noted in the packet, offer beer and wine from a small marketplace pantry setting behind the front desk of their main lobby. Representatives from Kodiarma are here. If you have any questions for them, they'd be happy to answer those questions for you.
Patrick, is there standard procedure moving from one operation to another, I believe you said?
Well, this is the first time they've ever applied
Oh, first time,
for a
okay.
license.
All right, I misunderstood you there. I don't have any questions. They've done all their work and it's been approved by you, Pat?
Yeah, everything's
Everything's in order?
in proper order.
Okay. Any questions? If not, make a motion for approval or denial.
I'll make a motion to give a Class A beer license, Class A liquor license for Kamadra, Clarion Point, Green Bay.
Second.
We've got a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? If not, motion carried.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck. Item C, action on ordinance 09-05-20, amending Ashwaubenon Municipal Code, Section 9-1-3, misuse of 9/11. Mr. Tony.
Yes. Good evening. This is a cleanup of our existing local ordinance regarding the misuse of the 911 number. Our current ordinance refers to a state statute that's no longer in effect, and essentially just the number has changed, so this is just a cleanup to cite the correct state statute so that this is properly adopted for citations issued under this. So I'd request that the draft ordinance be approved.
Okay.
If there are no questions, because it seems like it's just a number change,
Right.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 09-5-20.
Second.
Got a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item D, action and guidelines of background check of the village license and permit applications, the one we've been wanting to talk about. Chief, you want to start?
Absolutely. So as you know, we've had quite a few of these come before you. You know, when I first took the position, Tony and I talked a little bit about what our position or my position was on this. I wanted to make sure that we simply didn't rubber stamp these licenses and these requests. As I've said before, I think either selling or serving alcohol is a big responsibility for folks. I think that there's more to it than just reading an ID and taking money. You have to be responsible with what you're doing, with what you're especially serving, selling as well. We want to make sure that we're not selling to underage folks and that type of thing. And that takes a certain type of individual to be able to not only follow directions and follow the law, and also in a server type setting to make sure that they're not over serving. And so when I apply some of these guidelines, I want to make sure that we have the right people in place doing that so we can alleviate some of the issues that we may have if they don't do that properly. So I wanted to bring before you the guidelines that I use when I look at it. And I try to apply these equally and fairly. I don't look at the pictures of the applicants or anything like that. I don't pay attention to any of that. I just look at what I'm seeing on the criminal record. And for you guys, you don't necessarily get to see the entire criminal record. That can't be shared with certain individuals that aren't in law enforcement, that aren't certified to see that type of information. So you don't necessarily get to see all of it. So when I put down a denial, I'll put down basically simply what that denial is for. Like in this case, this last case, I put down that it was for a felony conviction within the last 10 years. There's obviously more to, and as you guys know, if you follow any kind of criminal law, any kind of cases in court, you realize that things get pled out, things get dismissed, other things get read into sentences, and they only come out with a certain conviction. Doesn't mean that that wasn't what they were charged with. A lot of times they're charged with a bunch of things, but only one thing gets convicted. So you guys don't necessarily get to see all that. So again, I've given you the guidelines that I go by. I try to, like I said, I try to apply those equally and fairly. And I try to make the right decisions to do that. And Mr. Chairman has talked about, the reason why I do that, and that he's been supportive of me in that regard, and I appreciate that. And so I just want to make sure that, yes, there's going to be individual circumstances. I think the previous one, it was kind of a technical thing where when she applied, it was less than 10 years. So I applied it equally to that one as well. However, after that, after she came in and pled her case, it had 10 years, it basically had expired, and she had done a great job. So, but I don't necessarily get to hear that, right, until they come here and do the appeals. And so I just want to make sure that we have this down to where we are all in agreement of what I'm doing, how I'm doing it. If there's anything that we can change, there's a little bit of wording that we can change on the application that may help as well, because a lot of the denials that I have are for failure to disclose, which means that they're not necessarily going on to CCAP, which they have access to, and putting down all their convictions, because that's what's required in the application. And if they're not putting the truthful information on the application, they may not be intending to do that. They just may be, I don't know, not savvy enough to look at that information, or they don't recall, or whatever it might be. But for me, in applying things equally and fairly, I have to go on there and say, well, they left off a speeding ticket, or whatever it might be, and I have to deny them based on that. We don't necessarily want to do that because we don't really care if they have speeding tickets, quite honestly. That doesn't really pertain to what they're applying for. So we can make a wording adjustment on the application and take that out of there so we don't have to even worry about that aspect.
Quick question.
Yep.
So you said, people can get charged for a lot of things and maybe only get convicted of one. Are they supposed to list all charges or all convictions?
Well, let's take a look at the application and see what it says. Tony says it says convictions.
And then also pending.
It says, have you ever been arrested and or convicted of a felony, misdemeanor, citation, or ordinance?
Mm-hmm.
And then do you have any pending charges?
Yep.
So past tense, like previously, we would look at conviction. So if they pled something down or something got dismissed, for example, in 2016, and only one charge got convicted, that's what we would list?
Yep. So, but also as they're going to list that, and that's what I look at, and I talk about those convictions. But we also talk about the responsibility that it takes to do this and that type of thing. So those are things I get to see as well you guys don't necessarily get to see that stuff.
Okay. And the application in our packet, is that the one that it is currently?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question for the attorney. When I see something about plea bargaining, do we have to honor that here at this committee?
I think the answer is no. And just to help me understand your question a little bit better, when you mean honor plea bargaining, what exactly do you mean by that? Is that considering what they ultimately entered a plea to?
Yes. If they've been convicted of something but plea bargained in a way that it can't be used against them in the future, how do we handle that here?
The standard, really what it comes down to is ultimately what they are convicted of. So if they do a plea bargain and it ends up as a different charge, you would consider the charge that they are convicted of ultimately. And then also along with that, the standard is that the conviction has to be substantially related to the license activity. So there has to be some sort of a connection as far as what they're all convicted of and whether it's substantially related to what they're looking for a license for. So for example, if they enter a plea to an operating while intoxicated or a drug-related offense and they want to become a bartender, those are controlled substances or illegal drugs or alcohol, and those would be substantially related to the license of being a bartender, so to say. So those are really the standards and considerations that you want to take into account when you make a decision.
Thank you.
Yes.
Tony, when you say they're convicted of, when they do a bargaining, they're convicted of a whatever, what happens to all of the other things that were connected to this? Are they still on record?
Generally, yes. There's a very limited set of circumstances in which something could be expunged from someone's record, and it's a really small subset of offenses and requirements, I believe. I can't recall off the top of my head, but I think it has to be at least a misdemeanor, and the individual has to be 21 years or younger. And so then it's possible in those sorts of small, limited circumstances where the offense could be expunged, which would mean that it is wiped off of their record. However, in a great majority of cases, when they are charged and things are dismissed or read in, they're still on the record, so to speak. They've generally been arrested as a result of the offenses they've been charged, and those still stay out there as part of the court system. So they're still essentially part of the record.
Brian, when you do your investigation, do you see all that and that determines your investigation too, or your summary
So
then?
you'll see what I see in the background packet. I mean, what I got in this last case, for example,
Right.
that's what I saw as well. And you guys got that in the packet, but for the most part, that's what I see as well.
Okay.
Some of those things are very hard to read, however, and hard to follow. And so even I, having done this for over 20 years, have to sit down and make check marks to figure out what has been done, what's been convicted, what's been pled, that type of stuff. So it's not necessarily easy to follow on some of those things.
Okay. Yeah, I just, I think a couple of people back, I was just, we were always, the chief had the information, and I couldn't figure out why we were not denying some of this stuff, because they, and that's why I questioned you on the 10-year and the 5-year, trying to understand what that was about. And, the lady we had in here, I believe at the last board meeting, she just barely made it for the 10-year. I believe it was around 8 years, if I remember right. This poor girl here, it was only, 2 years? 2 years, I think, 18, you said? I just, I believe in second chances, don't get me wrong, but when they're that close to the, I should say, away from the 10-year or the 5-year period, I've got to go along with the chief's recommendation. I know you were pretty tight on that, and
Yeah, I think-
know I made a motion on, yes, grant her the license, but that's going to change in my mind. We've got laws and regulations that we got to go by, and I believe we should maintain that.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I definitely agree, and I know I've probably been on the other side more often. I think I'm just, I know I like what the rules that you use, the 10 years, you know, kind of how you make your decisions, and obviously that you can see the big picture. My only thing was I just want to look at altering the application so that if we do get one just because they failed to leave it off the application, if it's a little bit more called out on the application, then I feel like it's like, well, you screwed yourself. You know, I 100% agree with all how you're making your decisions, your denials and everything. I just know in the beginning, more recently, we haven't had these, but we have had some that were just denied because they didn't write it down.
Well, and quite honestly, if it's basically a traffic violation, I've told the folks that are doing this that look, they basically left off a traffic violation, and that's why I'm denying it. And they'll send out another request and say, hey, you were denied because of this. They'll send another application back, and then I'll approve it. So that's kind of the workaround we're doing right now. But yes, we could tweak the language a little bit so that's not even an issue anymore, and that's kind of what I would prefer. But I do want to make sure that all of you and I are in agreement on what my guidelines are that I'm using and that you see in the packet here. So if there's anything that you guys want to tweak in that regard, please let me know, and I will make my recommendations based on that. So if you take a look at my memo and look at my guidelines, let me know if you guys are in agreement with that or not, so we can be more on the same page.
I think I'd like to see point 2 around the 5 years to be a little more defined, to be 2 drug convictions in the past 5 years, automatic, you're done. 1 drug conviction in the past 2 years, you're out. All I'm doing is just taking what you're doing and putting it more defined. That'd be my only thought. Because you actually put the statement in there that, okay, if you get 2 of these, guess what, you're going to be out. I think it should be just a bullet point right in there, Brian, that just says 5 years, 2 convictions, you know, it's going to be automatically denied. 1 drug conviction in the last 2 years, you know, example tonight, you should just be denied.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that if that's what you guys want. I don't really have any argument against that. The only thing that I can think of is it really kind of depends on what that is. You know, a possession might carry different weight for me than a possession with intent to deliver.
Right.
Those are more serious, obviously, so we might want to take that into consideration too.
And I'm fine with that. I'm just thinking to get it a little more definitive. And again, it's kind of going back to what Allison was saying, to get it on the actual application so that when somebody reads that, it's like, oh, yeah, I got this. Well, guess what? Why should I even apply? I really think that's...
Yeah, I'll leave that up to the attorney to decide whether or not he can put that on there, but...
Possible, Tony? I mean, they could still always apply, but...
Yeah, that's just what I'm thinking through as something, you know, essentially that indicates these are guidelines and it's not prohibited. Doesn't prohibit them from applying.
Right.
And essentially, because there still is that kind of discretion that everyone has. And it, in a sense, we just want to be careful about automatic denials in a sense.
Understand
and
that.
make sure we go through that kind of evaluation that it is substantially related, because it really is kind of a case-by-case basis evaluation too.
Mm-hmm.
Tony, is there anything that, not like I like to add work to myself, but I could take a stab at the alterations I'm thinking of? Because sometimes I'm not very good at verbalizing them. If I could take a stab at kind of how I think maybe it could be clearer on the application and then send it back to you for next agenda.
You
Or
could,
am I not allowed to touch village documents?
you could certainly, you obviously have a copy of the application. You could pass along anything that you think would be clear, and I can do the same. I would plan to put together some draft language and can also circulate that.
Okay.
One of the things we've already talked about is simply by eliminating the, non-traffic ordinance violations. Like, so we have you ever been arrested and or convicted of a felony, misdemeanor, OWI, or non-traffic ordinance violation? And that really gets rid of all the driving issues that aren't OWI related that we don't even have to consider anymore. So that's one of the things that we were already tossing around that we could probably do and implement right on the application itself to eliminate some of those, failure to disclose issues that aren't related.
Yeah, okay. I've noticed something else. We all know it's hard to find good people to work. The last few people that came in here all had some person, employee that backed them up on what good character they have. But, what, would she work there for 2 months? That really is not
60
telling us.
days.
Well, yeah, she didn't work there that long. And then also, one of the questions that I was going to ask, and I was kind of hoping one of you were going to ask is if she doesn't get this license, then does she really lose her job, or she's just not able to serve in that capacity? So I think she wanted to use it as some kind of an advancement. So I didn't want, maybe that's a question that you guys could ask, so you don't feel like if you don't give this to her, she's going to lose her job, because that may not be the case either.
And that's what I was about to interject. This previous individual, works in a C-store setting. Well, they may be by themselves and they may lose their position. However, you could have someone apply that's working down the street and still be denied. They can still serve. They just have to have someone who has an operator's license and are within eyeshot of them serving.
Yeah.
Is that the same way, Patrick, as you need a licensed bartender and staff, but the other ones don't have to be licensed?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, in my previous life prior to this one, I did HR for 24 gas stations, so I'm familiar. But I mean, it is very true. Unless you have a busy, typically first shift isn't an issue. It's the second shift. You can serve until 9, and if you don't have a busy gas station and you only have one worker there, sometimes you can lose your job, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I also don't think that we're in a place to say, well, I feel bad that you're going to lose your job, so I'm going to give you your liquor license. I think we still have to, take it each case by case.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just think in my years of HR, and I don't even have that much in me, I just know how to get eyes, I feel like, to go to a certain spot to call it out. And I think even just bolding some of the stuff on the application or italicizing it, or really check circuit court, Wisconsin Circuit Court access, that type of thing. Just a couple of things in there could hopefully stop the back and forth a little bit, and then it's just well, sorry, I don't want to be that black and white about it, because it isn't. But I think maybe we could just alter it slightly and
Okay, any other questions or concerns? Tony, you'll draft up something that we could take a look at and move on from there?
so it'll come to the next meeting, and then maybe we can just approve a new application. Is that what we would do? Just approve the new sheet?
Yes.
Okay.
All right,
Are we all in agreement with the guidelines, though? I want to make
Yes.
sure we're clear on that.
right.
Donovan, are you good with them? I know you're kind of out on the outskirts there.
Yeah, no, I like the guidelines, and for the case today, I had a couple things in my mind. It was so close. I did check CCAP and saw the other stuff in there from another county, and for me, the big fear is, yep, got the license, I can serve at the gas station. Now I'm going to quit and go work at somewhere else because now I have this license, but not thinking facetiously. But that was I was so torn because I too, I'm a second chance person, but that was too close and too much of the same thing for me. So I think with the guidelines here, that would help make it a lot more clear for me. And if we follow the same guidelines, then it's not as internal, as much of an internal struggle for me. So.
Okay, thanks, Donovan. If nothing else, items for next agenda, see staff if you want to put something on. We've got nothing else. Make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. We
Thank
are
you,
done.
Chief.